The narrative of their love is finished after 60 years together. At age 82, Carl Dean, Dolly Parton's husband, passed away, and now, for the first time, she must face life alone. "Without Carl, all of my wealth and accomplishments are nothing," she said. The devastated celebrity canceled all of her plans and hasn't left her house in Tennessee in weeks. She blames herself for his death, according to friends. At the age of 79, Dolly is currently facing the most difficult choice of her life. In the Smoky Woods of Tennessee, Dolly Parton was born on January 19, 1946, in a little one-room cabin. Her family didn't have nearly anything. She was delivered by a doctor her father couldn't even afford to pay. Rather, he handed him a bag of muesli. That incident will always be a part of Dolly's tale. She even composed a song about the doctor who took oatmeal as payment when she rose to fame and fortune. For someone whose future wealth would reach hundreds of millions of dollars, it was a modest start. Her family was large. Dolly was one of 12 children. The fourth. Without indoor plumbing or power, they were all crammed into a small space in that one-room shack. Near the Little Pigeon River was the cabin. A little property in the area known as Locust Ridge was where they later relocated. Dolly would later joke that she had spent a lot of money refurbishing her childhood house to make it appear as impoverished as it actually was. The family managed to make it work despite the house having very little. Her father worked at any job that paid a bit, including construction and farming. The difficult circumstances profoundly influenced Dolly. She would use the tales, emotions and music they provided to create songs like Coat of Many Colors. Something occurred to Dolly when she was 9 years old, and it affected her forever. Larry is a boy that was born to her mother. Dolly exulted. Larry would be her kid to look after, her mother had assured her. Baby Larry, however, passed away 4 days after his birth. It crushed Dolly's heart. Somehow, she felt she had let him down. For years the shame followed her around. She stated she was crushed by that incident, even decades later. At that age, Dolly too experienced a terrifying mishap. She leaped over a fence as she was outside having fun. She almost cut off 3 of her toes when she landed on a shattered mason jar. Because her family didn't have enough money and lived too far from a hospital, her mother had to treat the wound herself, while Dolly's mother used kerosene to clean the wound and a sewing needle and thread to put the toes back on. Her brothers held her down. Despite being filthy and uncomfortable, it was effective. Toes recovered. And even now, Dolly continues to walk on them. Dolly was already developing a liking for music in spite of the difficulties. Despite having several children to look after, her mother's love of singing and playing the guitar was passed on to Dolly. By the time she was 5 years old, Dolly had composed her first song about her corn husk doll. With the assistance of her mother, Dolly sung into a tin can microphone while she wrote the lyrics. Dolly sung in church at the age of 6. She was playing a guitar that her uncle had crafted when she was 7. She acquired her very first guitar by the age of 8. She started doing TV and radio shows in Knoxville before the age of 10. At the age of 13, she made her stage debut at Nashville's Grand Ole Opry. Even though she was just a child, everyone could obviously see she was unique. When Dolly was 10 years old, she was given a regular slot on the Cass Walker Farm and Home Hour, a local radio and television program. After her uncle persuaded her to attend an audition, Dolly approached Cass Walker and made her employment request. Her initial performance was so well received by the audience that they requested an encore. Even though she didn't yet possess a television, she was suddenly performing for thousands of East Tennessee households every week. Years later, at the age of 18, Dolly made the quick decision to go to Nashville. She went to a laundry to wash her clothing on her first day in the city. She met Carl Dean when she was waiting, and while out for a stroll, she heard him calling out to her from his pickup vehicle. Dolly responded with a wave. According to Carl's later statement, he decided to marry her the moment he laid eyes on her. He wasn't being humorous. They fell in love quickly. He took her home to meet his folks shortly after. Despite her manager's caution that marriage may harm her career, Dolly and Carl discreetly were married in Georgia 2 years later. The only people present were a preacher and her mother. Dolly put forth a lot of effort as a songwriter during those formative years. She battled to get recognition as a vocalist, while writing popular songs for others. She co-wrote the song Put It Off Until Tomorrow with her uncle Bill Owens, and it became a huge hit for another singer. That song and others she penned for artists like Hank Williams Jr. and Kitty Wells demonstrated her skill. People still needed some time to realize that she was more than simply the author of a star. The label didn't believe she should perform country music when she signed with Monument Records in 1965, which is ironic. In an attempt to make her a pop singer, they said that her voice was too sweet and high. She put out some singles that had a bubblegum pop vibe, but they were unsuccessful. It wasn't her. Staying loyal to her passion, she continued to write country music on the side. Following a year of failures, the label eventually allowed her to record country. In 1967, her first country hit was released. It was titled Dumb Blonde, and despite the fact that Dolly didn't create it, the song was a wonderful fit for her. The lyrics stated, "Don't assume I'm stupid just because I'm blonde." It was the ideal response for anyone who misjudged her based only on her appearance. The song helped her debut album get off the ground and made it onto the charts. Hi there, this is Dolly. It also influenced how she was seen, even if others didn't see it at first. This person was intelligent, gifted, and always one step ahead. In 1967, Porter Wagoner, who was already well known in the country music industry, chose to invite teenage vocalist Dolly Parton to perform on his show. Wearing gaudy diamond outfits, he had a devoted fan base. With her high bouffant hair and baby features, Dolly felt apprehensive and self-conscious. She didn't have a good first show, she spoke too quickly, and the audience didn't immediately get on board with her. Porter recalled the first difficulties, but he had faith in her. In order to assist, he began performing duets with her in the recording studio, on stage and on his weekly TV show. 2 months following their initial recording session, their rendition of The Last Thing on My Mind began gaining popularity. Porter initially vowed to pay for any damages even though RCA Records was reluctant to sign her. The risk paid off. One of the biggest stars in RCA's history would be Dolly. Behind the scenes, however, things weren't simple. Porter and Dolly had already begun to argue after just 6 months. She wasn't silent, and had strong ideas that did not please him. Being in charge pleased Porter. Since it was his program, he anticipated success. Dolly refused to back down. She referred to him as a male chauvinist years later, and said that they had a heated argument. Even though they had a tense relationship, they continued to collaborate. They recorded successful records and appeared on television as a pair, performing week after week. From the outside, they were one of the most well-known duos in country music, but they were always fighting off stage. They both had a great deal of concern. Nevertheless, their collaboration turned into one of the most spectacular feuds in country music history. Dolly realized it was time to move on after they had worked together for 7 years. Porter had been guaranteed 5 years, but it ended up being 7. He did not wish for her to go. They had a strong emotional and professional bond, but she was prepared. The one thing she could always rely on, composing, was what she did when he refused to listen. She spent the night writing a song, which she presented to him the next day. "Sit down and listen," she said. He broke down in tears as she sang. It was the song I Will Always Love You. Romance wasn't the point. It was a way to say goodbye, thank you, and go with love. Porter informed her that it was the finest song she had ever composed. He allowed her to leave, but only if he could provide the record. "Yes," she said. The song became one of the most popular country singles of the year after reaching #1. Later that year, an unforeseen event occurred. Elvis Presley desired to have I Will Always Love You recorded. Dolly was incredulous. The king of rock and roll was this. She was excited. It was all set. He invited her to the studio so she could see him record it. But Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis Presley's manager, contacted the night before with a request. He claimed that 50% of the song's publication rights were required. Dolly gasped. Nobody had alerted her about this. "I don't have that rule," she informed him. She found great meaning in the song. The future belonged to her. "No," she said. The Colonel was unwavering. "It has no recording rights." Dolly refused to back down and turned to go. The song was never recorded by Elvis Presley. Her heart ached to turn him down. She sobbed throughout the night. They all said she was insane. It was after all Elvis. However, her instincts urged her not to. Years later, her choice paid off in a way she never would have thought possible. "I Will Always Love You" was recorded by Whitney Houston for the 1992 film The Bodyguard. With over 20 million copies sold, it became a worldwide success. That rendition alone brought in at least $10 million for Dolly in the 1990s. In retrospect, she jokingly remarked, "I earned enough money to purchase Graceland." Dolly Parton witnessed a stunning red-haired bank teller make inappropriate advances towards her husband in 1973. Rather than becoming irate, she transformed her envy into something enchanting. Speaking in jest, she said that her husband was spending more time at the bank than they had money for. The inspiration for Jolene, a song about a woman pleading with another not to take her boyfriend, comes from that actual event. When an 8-year-old admirer requested Dolly for her signature, she came up with the moniker Jolene. Dolly chose to use the moniker because she thought it sounded great in the song. The fact that she penned two of her most famous songs, Jolene and I Will Always Love You, on the same day and within hours of each other, is even more amazing. Dolly would thank the woman during a concert years later, stating that the song and all of its revenue would never have been produced if it weren't for her. Dolly's goals went beyond country prominence. A few years later, the Globe was what she desired. She made a daring move in 1977. Her 19th album Here You Come Again was published, and this time she took aim for the top of the charts. She knew it had the perfect tone, even if she didn't write the title song. It reached #1 in the nation and soared to #3 on the pop charts. For Dolly, it was strategy rather than chance. She selected songs that would be liked by everybody, engaged a pop producer, and paid close attention to every little detail. She was successful in her gamble. The CD introduced her music to a completely new audience, and reached gold and platinum. She made a pop version of her song Two Doors Down, which became another smash. It had been Dolly. The world was paying attention to her crossing over. Hollywood waited, even though Dolly Parton was already a music star. She debuted in a movie in 1980, co-starring with Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin in the comedy 9 to 5. Both the film and Dolly's written and sang title song were successful. That song became an anthem, not merely the #1 single on the charts. It addressed the annoyances of working women by delivering a serious message with appealing music. She was nominated for an Oscar and won 2 Grammys for the song. Both reviewers and the general public adored it. It continued to get accolades as one of the greatest songs in movie history years later. The trio reconnected on stage at the 2017 Emmy Awards, decades after their first meeting. When Fonda and Tomlin made bold political remarks about then-President Donald Trump, the light-hearted throwback quickly turned tense. Their remarks created a sensation, but Dolly remained unfazed. "They're Lily, and they're Jane, and I'm Dolly," she said, avoiding the drama. She was encapsulated in just one sentence: charming, self-reliant, and peacekeeping-focused. Her role was to amuse, not to divide, she reminded everyone. She said that she would just make a joke, if all else failed. Even as her notoriety increased, Dolly never lost sight of her roots. She called a little amusement park close to her birthplace Dollywood, after purchasing it in 1986. She transformed it into something unique, rather than only adding her name to it. Both employment and tourists were brought to the area by the park, become one of Tennessee's most popular tourist destinations. Dollywood has honored Dolly's songs and Appalachian heritage, while adding rides, performances, and even museums throughout the years. It developed into an area where residents could find employment, and families could enjoy themselves. Dolly wasn't finished giving back though. She started the Imagination Library in 1996, with the goal of inspiring youngsters to enjoy reading. Dolly was motivated to provide children the opportunities her father did not have, since he was illiterate. The concept was straightforward. Give children from birth to age 5 a free book each month. What began in her hometown expanded throughout the United States and abroad. By 2022, the organization was sending about 2 million books to kids worldwide each month. Dolly demonstrated her belief that reading has the power to transform lives. Her work was still centered around music. She collaborated on the 1987 CD trio with Linda Ronstadt and Emmylou Harris. Although it had taken years for it to happen, the wait was worthwhile. The CD was a huge hit, and the harmonies were amazing. It sold millions of copies, and spent weeks at the top of the national charts. The trio received a Grammy, and other notable honors. The record was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame years later. Singing with them, according to Dolly, was an inexplicable high. It was a sound recording of pure bliss. Carl Dean first spotted Dolly Parton on a sunny September day in 1964 outside a laundry in Nashville. She was only 18. He was 21 years old, and for him, everything changed in that instant. Later on, he declared, "I'm going to marry that girl. And she's gorgeous, Lord." Immediately after that, Carl wasted no time. Every day of that week, he visited her aunt's house only to sit on the porch with her. He didn't take her to dinner or the movies on their first actual date. He took her to his parents' house. She was the one, he already knew. Dolly recalled years later how odd it felt that he didn't declare his love for her until they were married. As confused as a road lizard in a spin dryer, she claimed. Carl, though, was that person, calm, steady. Indeed, they were in love for about 60 years. A large wedding was not what they desired. Only her mother and the preacher's wife were there as they secretly traveled to Ringgold, Georgia, on May 30, 1966, to exchange vows. It was not yet expected to occur. In order to protect her budding career, Dolly's manager had advised her to put off getting married. Nevertheless, they proceeded. Dolly was dressed simply in a handcrafted outfit created by her mother. She had a little flower and a Bible. Then, as if nothing had occurred, they returned to work a few hours later. Invitations to the wedding had already been sent out by Carl's mother. To cancel them, they had to inform her. She was devastated. However, Carl and Dolly had no desire for attention. All they desired was to be together. Carl once tried his hand at the spotlight. He accompanied Dolly to a banquet, hosted by the music business that year, when she received her first songwriting honor. Then he added, "I'm happy for you, Dolly, and I want you to have everything you want, but please don't ask me to attend any more of those awful events." She also didn't. He never attended her concerts, red carpet events, or award ceremonies. Some began to claim he wasn't genuine. Fans occasionally told Dolly in her book, "We don't believe he's real." Carl, however, was genuine. Although secret, he remained in the background, silently encouraging her, always there, and always proud. A secret was revealed by Dolly years later. In her absence, Carl would go to Dollywood. Like everyone else, he would purchase his own ticket and stand in queue. He was not looking for preferential treatment. All he wanted to do was witness it. He would watch the performances, eat funnel cakes, and stroll across the park. Although he didn't enjoy roller coasters, he was keenly aware of everything else. He would tell Dolly what needed to be fixed when he got home. He might argue, "You need additional restrooms," or "There are too many people there." That was what he did all the way to the finish. Carl was always a part of her world, even in the shadows, and he always improved it. Dolly Parton's ability to make people laugh, particularly by poking fun of herself, has always been evident. "It costs a lot of money to look this cheap," is one of her most well-known quotes. Fans continue to recite what she said in the late 1970s. Dolly had no problem making light of her appearance, wigs, or even her difficult upbringing. She used to joke that when she was a child, the only thing that kept her warm during the cold was when her siblings urinated on her in bed. They were that impoverished. However, her humor increased her popularity. She was also able to avoid losing her appeal while avoiding criticism, because to it, there was a woman who understood precisely what she was doing behind the flamboyant costumes and long hair. Dolly deliberately constructed her image. She desired to be noticed. She wished to be remembered. She made the decision to take charge after a few early business transactions failed. She had her own tour buses, her own record label, everything. At the time, such freedom was uncommon. Experts advised her that Dollywood wouldn't succeed when she came up with the concept in the 1980s. She followed her instincts and fired them. It was worthwhile. "I'm totally artificial, but I'm totally real," she once remarked. Her appearance made others laugh, but she was never the target of the joke. Her biggest strength was that she was fully aware of who she was. In a well-known interview with Barbara Walters in 1977, that strength was clearly demonstrated. "Dolly feel like a joke?" Walters questioned. Dolly did not recoil. She admitted that she was the one in charge, even though she knew that people were making fun of her. She had faith in her life, her abilities, and her decisions. Walters then inquired as to whether she would have been referred to as a hillbilly in her native country. Dolly remained calm. Rather, she defended her heritage. She claimed that there was a certain country class among the people she grew up with. It was evident that she was proud of her origins. Though not in the typical sense, Dolly also has a strong religious belief. Her grandpa was a fiery preacher, and she grew raised in a strict church. She even had a fear of God as a youngster. However, her views evolved with time. She now describes herself as spiritual rather than religious. According to her, everyone possesses a greater energy known as God. She does not regularly attend church on Sundays. Rather, she uses a tiny chapel in her backyard to create music and pray. She thinks she hears the voice of God in the wind. She finds solace in that silent connection. She was also among the first well-known celebrities to advocate for the LGBTQ+ community because of her open heart. She sung about family back in 1991, mentioning LGBT individuals and preachers who said that everyone belonged. Dolly raised her voice in 2023 when Tennessee approved legislation restricting transgender rights. She claimed to have pals that are homosexual and transgender, and she cherished each one of them. She did not pass judgment. She also made the remark that homosexual people should be let to suffer if straight people could get married. She repeatedly defended others, even when it wasn't popular. She also retaliated when several Christians chastised her for it. "God does that," she said, "not yours." Even though the world saw Dolly's public side, her husband Carl Dean was always the one who knew her private side the best. Their marriage lasted over 60 years. Neither of them addressed the other by name. Rather, they adopted monikers such as Angel Cakes, Dottie, Mama, and Daddy. They had a hidden language of their own. He would actually become irate if Dolly ever called him Carl. They were that close together. Their closeness was as strong as any family could be. Despite the fact that they never had children, they reaffirmed their vows in 2016, the year of their 50th anniversary. Only a minister and his wife attended their first wedding, which was a low-key affair. However, Dolly was dressed up this time, and Carl consented to join in the festivities. Even doing his first interview in front of an audience was a lovely way to commemorate a long and devoted marriage, and the proceeds from the sale of the pictures went to Dolly's children's literacy charity. However, Carl's health started to deteriorate in the ensuing years. He experienced cardiac issues before developing dementia. When Johnny passed out at home in 2019, Dolly took him to the hospital right away. Things were never the same when he recovered. Dolly held herself responsible. In order to be with him, she halted her trip. She was reluctant to part from him. She didn't care how famous or wealthy she was without Carl. She once remarked that without Carl, all of her wealth and accomplishments would be nothing. Then, at the age of 82, Carl Dean died on March 3, 2025. As always, he made the announcement quietly and with respect. Throughout their marriage, he had avoided the limelight, even missing Dolly's performances. He never pursued celebrity, and operated a paving company in Nashville. Only his closest relatives were present at the burial when he passed away. He would have preferred it that way. Following his death, Dolly sent a brief note. She remarked that words cannot do justice to the love we shared. She shared another message a few days later, referring to it as a love letter to her friends and admirers. She claimed to have found serenity, and thanked everyone for their generosity. Being aware that Carl was in the arms of God, she concluded by saying, "I will always love you," in a low voice. Days after his passing on March 14th, Dolly unexpectedly showed up at Dollywood. During an interview she was candid. She said, "I'm doing better than I anticipated. I've spent 60 years with him. Some things will need to be relearned by me." She acknowledged how much she missed him, but said that because he was at peace, she was too. She intended to replace the void in her heart with positive things and keep Carl in her heart. She paid homage to the guy who had always supported her with a new song titled "If You Hadn't Been There," which was published shortly after.